Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your tutor Mr. Baraka, and today I want us to look at Kcse Biology Paper 1 2022. From my analysis, I've realized that there are 10 topics that are likely to be tested in this year's Kcse Paper 1, and these are the topics I've indicated there. There's transport, psychology, nutrition, response, excretion, reproduction, genetics, support, growth, and gaseous exchange. So as you do your revision, make sure that you look at these topics very carefully, because you are likely to meet questions from these topics this year. So the first one is transport. What do we expect from transport? Adaptations of what? Xylem and phloem I've indicated there. And then the other part is adaptations of red blood cells and adaptations of what? Blood capillaries. So you have to understand all those areas. You have to understand transpiration, factors affecting what rate of transpiration, and then the significance of transpiration in plants. You have also to understand transverse sections of what? Dicot stems and monocot stems, dicot roots and monocot roots. So if you're able to identify them with reasons, then you'll be okay. And then the other topic is ecology. For ecology, you have to go through biotic and abiotic factors and how they influence what distribution of organisms in an ecosystem. And then population ecology simply means those methods of estimating population, and the most common one is recapture. You have to know how it is done and the assumptions from there. And then you must also know coordinate methods, belt transect, line transect, and the other one is head count, or what we call census. And then nitrogen cycle. For the cycle, you have to know the process involved, how nitrogen moves from the atmosphere to the soil, how it is fixed in leguminous legumes, how it is fixed in legumes. There's a biological fixation, and then there's non-biological fixation. You have to know that. Nitrogen fixation, you have to know nitrification, you have also to know denitrification, and then the bacteria involved in denitrification, you must also be aware of that. And then plant adaptation simply means how different types of plants are adapted to their habitats: mesophytes, hydrophytes, xerophytes. You have to remember that. And then for pollution, you have to remember about the types: air pollution, water pollution, and soil pollution. Basically the causes and the effects, and how you can control those types of pollution. And then the other one is from pollution still, diseases. You have to know the causative agents. For example, typhoid, it is Salmonella typhi, and you underline separately. You use the binomial rules. And then if it is cholera, Vibrio cholerae. If it is Ascariasis, Ascaris lumbricoides, you have to remember that. So basically bacterial diseases, protozoan diseases, if it is malaria, all those species of plasmodium, you have to remember them. If it is schistosomiasis, or what we call bilharzia, remember the causative agents. If you are able to do that, then you'll be okay in this topic. And then we go to excretion. For excretion, you start with plants, reasons why plants lack what? Complex excretory organs. There are reasons why. And then what? Importance of plant excretory products. You have to remember that. Papain, colchicine, all of them. You have to remember them. Then we go to the skin. For the skin, there are two parts. Role of the skin in thermoregulation. What happens in the structure of the skin when temperatures are above normal or below normal. And then the other part is what? Parts of the skin and their functions. If you know that, you're okay. Then you go to kidney. For kidney, you look for what? You look for roles of kidney. And then the other part is how urine is formed. So you have to know right from what? Afferent, arterial, then into the glomerulus, and then out through what? Efferent arteriole, and then ultrafiltration in the glomerulus. You form glomerular filtrate, you go down to Bowman's capsule, then you go to proximal, descending limb of the loop of venule, ascending limb of the loop of venule, then you go to distal. You have to remember all what is happening there. You'll be safer for kidney. And then for the liver, it is basically what? Homeostatic functions of the liver. You have to remember them: detoxification, deamination, regulation of blood sugar, all of them. If you are able to remember those functions and you are able to explain, then you'll be safe with what? The liver. So in nutrition, you must go through what? Process of photosynthesis. You have to know what happens in light stage and the dark stage, and then factors affecting what? Photosynthesis. This process is very common in exams. And the other part on nutrition is the leaf adaptation, how a green leaf is adapted to what? Photosynthetic function. You have to remember all that. And then you must also be aware of what happens along the alimentary canal in human beings. You have to know what happens in the mouth, what happens in the stomach, duodenum, ileum, and then colon. Those areas you have to know what is happening there, including what? Digestion, mechanical and chemical digestion in the mouth, and then you go to the stomach, what happens there for proteins, then duodenum, all the way up to what? All the way up to releasing of what? Waste materials in form of fecal matter. You have also to remember what? The adaptation of what? Adaptation of ileum. You have to remember that, what happens in the ileum. Then you go to what? You go to enzymes. For this one, it's what? Basically factors affecting what? Enzyme controlled reactions. So you have to remember how temperature affects, how enzyme concentration and substrate concentration affect what? Enzyme reactions, all that. Enzyme inhibitors, you must remember that, all those factors. Then you go to dentition, and the most common one is what? The dental formula of herbivorous organisms. For herbivores, you have to know. If you are given the formula, you have to understand what type of organism is involved, the type of food involved there. So that one is very important for the sake of this exam this year. And then factors affecting what? Energy requirement in human beings. You have to know factors like sex, factors like age, factors like pregnancy and lactation, factors like what? State of health and all that. You have to remember how they affect what? Energy requirement in human beings. If you're able to do that, then you're okay with nutrition. And then you go to response. For response, there are a few areas that you must always make sure that you understand before you go for that paper. And this one is tropisms. And the most common tropisms that are very examinable is what? Thigmotropism, or what we call haplotropism. Why some plants twine along what? Other support materials, or tendrils coil around support materials. And then phototropism, bending of what? Of plants towards light. And then geotropism, effect of gravity on auxins. So you have to know all those tropisms. And then reflex action, simple and conditioned, you have to know that. Then the synapse, what happens at the synapse, you have to be aware of that. And then the eye is parts and functions, the ear, parts and functions. If you're able to do that, then you're okay. Then you go to reproduction. For reproduction, you look at asexual reproduction. This is spore formation, there's binary fission. You have to remember all those processes. What else? The other one is cell division, mitosis and meiosis, and the differences between mitosis and meiosis. Significance of meiosis and mitosis is important. Double fertilization in flowering plants, you have to know what happens. Basically, if you are given the embryo sac, you have to know where are the synergies, where do you have the polar nuclei, where do you have the functional egg, where do you have where when the male nuclei come into the embryo sac, The first one is what? It is a fertilization of the egg cell to form a diploid zygote, and then the other male nucleus fuses with the polar nucleus to form what? A triploid nucleus. So you're supposed to know how double fertilization happens in the embryo sac. So basically the embryo sac is in the ovule. So you go to what? From a flower you go to fruits. So you have to know even the changes that happen from a flower to a fruit after fertilization. And then for fruits you have to know types of fruits, and the most common fruits are berries, drupes, cypsela, caryopsis, or what you call the grain. You have to know that, and then you have to know also placentation in fruits, and then dispersal in fruits. Basically the types of dispersal, where you have animal, you have wind, you have water, and then you have self dispersal. Then female and male reproductive systems, you know, the parts and their functions is very important. And then insect and wind pollinated flowers, you see how they are adapted. You will be safe with this topic. And then we go to genetics. For genetics, it is actually what? Variations, the meaning of variation, types of variation, discontinuous and continuous, and then causes of variation. We said fertilization, gamete formation, and mutation. You have to know all of them. And then you have to know how to state Mendel's law, Mendel's what? First law of inheritance. You have to remember that. And then mutations, both gene and chromosomal mutation. And for gene mutation, the most common mutations in gene mutation, gene mutations that are examinable, we have deletion, we have insertion, we have inversion. You have to remember that. And then conditions that are caused by gene mutation, you have to remember them, like albinism, sickle cell anemia, hemophilia, color blindness. They come from there, gene mutations. And then chromosomal mutations, the main one that is very important is non-disjunction, because it causes what? Syndromes. Turner syndrome, you have to know Turner syndromes and the characteristics, how you get Klinefelter syndrome and the characteristics, and Down syndrome and characteristics. Those syndromes are very common in paper 1. And then genetic crosses, you have to know how to make a genetic cross, how to show genotypes of parents, and then you put the X in between the genotypes of the parents, and then you get gametes. And we said gametes, the circles must be complete circles. Make sure that they are complete circles. Then make sure that the fusion lines are correctly done, and then now the genotypes of the offspring. So that one is around 4 marks. You must make sure that you are able to draw what? A very good genetic cross. Even for a Punnett square, sometimes you are told to make a cross using a Punnett square. Make sure that you show what? The genotypes of the parents, and between the genotypes of parents you put that X, and then you draw the square, and make sure that you indicate your gametes properly, and make sure the square is perfect. So you'll be okay with genetics. And then for support and movement, there are things that you have to remember. Things like what? The difference between a tendon and a ligament. That one is very common. Joints, you have to identify ball and socket and hinge joint. And we said for ball and socket, they are found where? These joints are found in a human being. Shoulder joint is ball and socket. Hip joint is ball and socket. For the knee joint and elbow joint, those are hinge joints. So you have to remember that. And then how herbaceous plants achieve support. You have to remember that. We said they can twine. Some twine along what? Support materials. Some use thorns or hooks for attachment on other surfaces. And then also what? Use of turgid parenchyma cells. So that one is also very important. You have to remember that. And then significance of movement in animals and plants. Why animals move and why plants move. Then there's another one, how plants compensate for their inability to locomote. You have to remember that. The other one is what? Tilapia, bony fish like tilapia, the parts and the functions of those parts. Paired fins and paired fins, you have to know all that. Swim bladder, the function of swim bladder, the functions of the fins, function of operculum, all those parts of the fish, like tilapia, you have to know them. And then you go to bones. For bones, you have to understand how scapula looks like and adaptation, humerus, ulnar, radius, pelvic girdle, humerus, and femur. All of them, you have to know what the other adaptations. You'll be safe. And then for vertebrae, look at atlas, you look at axis, especially the difference between atlas and axis. You have to understand that. And then typical cervical vertebra, you have to know how it looks like. Thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, you have to know all these vertebrae, how they adapted. Even if you are given a photograph, you must be able to understand whatever you are given there, which type of vertebra is that, and then giving what adaptations. And then for growth, you have to go through what to understand the sigmoid curve, especially the lag and log phases, what happens there. Germination. For germination, you have to know the meaning of germination, types of germinations, and then factors affecting what germination of seeds. You must be aware of that. Then there's a dormancy. You have to know what is a seed dormancy and the factors that may induce what dormancy in seeds, and the ways of breaking what dormancy. And then roles of hormones in plant growth. Hormones like auxins, florigins, gibberellins, cytokinins, the roles of those hormones in plants, very important. And then growth curves in what? Arthropods. And the growth curve in arthropods is the intermittent curve. So you have to know how it happens. If you are given the curve, you must know, you must be able to identify this one is the intermittent curve, and then what happens along that curve. And then the hormones that are important in growth in arthropods. This is ecdysone hormone that causes ecdysis, and then juvenile hormone that causes what? Formation of exoskeleton. So you must be able to understand the roles of ecdysone hormone and juvenile hormone. And then the last part for growth is metamorphosis. You must know metamorphosis, the two types, complete and incomplete, and examples of organisms that have complete and incomplete, the stages of complete and incomplete, advantages of complete, of incomplete, differences between complete and incomplete metamorphosis. Those are areas that you must remember in paper 1. And then the last topic is gaseous exchange. For gaseous exchange, understand how what inhalation and exhalation happens in humans. So, and make sure you do it correctly. Respiratory diseases, you give causative agents, things like tuberculosis, pneumonia. You must know what causes those diseases, and you follow binomial rules. And then adaptation of respiratory surfaces like what? Tracheoles, gill filaments to their functions. You must remember that. The structure and function of the gill, very important. The gill filaments, their functions, gill bar, the function, and the gill records, the function. You must know that. And then theories of opening and closing of the stomata. You must be able to understand how photosynthetic theory happens, starch sugar interconversion theory, or how it happens. And then the other one is what? Potassium ion theory. You must also know how it happens. And then last part is gaseous exchange in amphibians. You must know how it happens via what? Buccal cavity or the alveoli in their lungs, or through the what? Their moist skin lining. So if you're able to know that, then you'll be safe for this exam. And I'm sure that if you look at the content that I've talked about for these 10 topics, then biology paper 1 2022 to you will be actually what? A walk in the park. You'll get very good marks. I wish you all the best as you prepare for your biology paper 1, and see you next time.